There's an excellent op-ed published today in the New York Times. This is it right here. It's called "What Snowflakes Get Right About Free Speech," and it's by Ulrich Baer, and I cannot recommend it to you highly enough. In the piece, Ulrich Baer describes how the student protesters who have come out to stand against speakers such as Milo Yiannopoulos or Richard Spencer in recent weeks and months at college campuses across the United States. These students who have often been attacked and vilified by people on the right as being anti-free speech or putting their own feelings and their own sensitivities ahead of stalwart principles of the republic like free speech are snowflakes, and they just need to be silenced or shamed into going back to their dorms and studying instead of going out and hitting the streets and protesting people like Spencer or Yiannopoulos. Baer argues really persuasively and really articulately that it is actually those folks, the so-called snowflakes, who are the true champions of free speech, not the apologists and the defenders of Spencer and Yiannopoulos and all of the other assorted deplorable people, the hate mongers and purveyors of ignorance and intolerance who have for some reason been granted platforms on college campuses with alarming frequency over the last few years. And in this piece, Baer covers a lot of really interesting ground. He talks about the limited value of debates in situations like this. He talks about the idea that there are certain topics that really shouldn't be held up for public debate, that universities shouldn't feel a responsibility to host debates over. If there is a proposed debate or a proposed sort of implied debate, which is often the excuse used when awful people like Spencer and Yiannopoulos and others of their ilk are invited to speak at college campuses, the excuse made by people who, even by people who claim not to want to defend their ideology, they say, well, we need to hear them out because their ideas need to be heard in order to be argued about and rejected. And Baer makes the point that in most cases, people like Richard Spencer and Milo Yiannopoulos have nothing new to say and will not be informing anyone in the audience about their views or telling anyone anything that they haven't heard already. You are merely, by giving them an audience, by giving them a platform, you are merely enabling them and allowing them to perpetuate their hatred and their intolerance and propagate their twisted and in many cases harmful and dangerous ideology. And I've linked to the piece in the description box of this video. I urge all of you to go read it. But there is one particular passage that I want to share with you. Ulrich Baer says, quote, "The idea of freedom of speech does not mean a blanket permission to say anything anybody thinks. It means balancing the inherent value of a given view with the obligation to ensure that other members of a given community can participate in discourse as fully recognized members of that community. Free speech protections, not only but especially in universities, which aim to educate students in how to belong to various communities, should not mean that someone's humanity or their right to participate in political speech as political agents can be freely attacked, demeaned, or questioned." Baer also points out how the abilities of folks in marginalized groups, for instance, trans people, people of color, undocumented immigrants, and the list goes on, have been attacked and undermined by others in the name of freedom of speech. And that reminds me, as many things in this discussion often do, of the paradox of tolerance, which is something that I have spoken about in videos before, and a lot of you already know what it is, but just in case you haven't heard of the paradox of tolerance, it was stated most famously by Karl Popper, who said that if you want a truly tolerant society, the one thing you must not be tolerant of is intolerance. The paradox is there can be no such thing as perfect tolerance. Because if you are tolerant of everything, including intolerance, then ultimately intolerance will take over. The intolerant will impose their will on the tolerant, and you will wind up with a final product of an intolerant society, which was allowed to happen in the name of tolerance. See, a lot of folks in the atheist and skeptical community especially believe that when they are defending the rights of awful people, like Spencer or Yiannopoulos, or awful groups like neo-Nazi groups or the Ku Klux Klan or other white supremacist or white nationalist groups to speak, that they are doing something good, that they're defending the principle of freedom of speech. And they think, well, I have to defend freedom of speech for people like that because I want to preserve it for people like me and for other people. And that's a wonderful idea, and that's a wonderful concept, and it's a wonderful principle. But I don't think that it translates to real life perfectly. I think that if you truly care about freedom of speech, and the situation you want to see realized is the maximum number of people able to exercise their freedom of speech in our society, able to participate in political conversations, especially in ways that will be recognized and valued. And if you particularly would like to see this happen for groups of people who have been historically disenfranchised, who have been historically ignored or silenced or erased, whose contributions and ideas and voices have not been valued, then I don't see how you can justify choosing to defend neo-Nazis and people like Richard Spencer and people like Milo Yiannopoulos when they are protested, when their events are shut down by students at those colleges who have simply had enough and refuse to allow people like that to use their microphones and their stages and their venues to speak to their audience and spread their hatred and intolerance. If you believe in freedom of speech, you should be on the side of the protesters. You should be not defending the rights of people like Spencer and Yiannopoulos and others like that to spread their hatred. This is not an easy issue because we are human beings, we are imperfect, and there will never be a perfect system for determining who it is best to listen to and platform and who it is best to ignore. But we can at least decide amongst ourselves that the principle we should follow is not only freedom of speech, but guaranteeing freedom of speech to the largest possible number of people, maximum freedom of speech. And we should not let our idealization of the principle of perfect freedom of speech or perfect tolerance prevent us from achieving the attainable goal of maximum tolerance or maximum freedom of speech. A society where people who push ignorance and intolerance and hateful, dehumanizing ideologies are, legally speaking, free to say whatever they wish, but practically speaking, are not invited on prominent radio or TV shows or podcasts or YouTube channels, are not given lucrative book deals, are not invited to speak on stage at colleges and universities, and generally speaking, find it difficult, if not impossible, to amplify and spread their awful messages beyond their little circle of ignorance and hate. That sounds pretty damn good to me. How about you?